So in this presentation, we're going to go from chapter 10, page 60, to chapter 15, page 105. And here we have a very important quotation from the novel. And this tells us how society changed. So how is it that a society that was free, where women were equal to men, changed to the one that we have in Gilead? So here's part of the explanation. We lived as usual by ignoring. Ignoring isn't the same as ignorance. You have to work at it. So if you are ignorant of something, it simply means that you don't know about it. Okay, it's not because you're stupid, it's just that you do not have the knowledge. If you ignore something, then you are aware that something is happening, but you're not paying attention to it. Okay, so you know about it, but you're not paying attention. Nothing changes instantaneously. In a gradually heating bathtub, you'd be boiled to death before you knew it. There were stories in the newspapers, of course. Corpses in ditches or the woods, bludgeoned to death or mutilated, interfered with, as they used to say. But they were about other women, and the men who did such things were other men. None of them were men we knew. The newspaper stories were like dreams to us, bad dreams dreamt by others. How awful, we would say, and they were. But they were awful without being believable. They were too melodramatic. They had a dimension that was not the dimension of our lives. We were the people who were not in the papers. We lived in the blank white spaces at the edges of print. It gave us more freedom. We lived in the gaps between the stories. So the point is that there were changes that were beginning to happen. There was increased violence, particularly increased violence against women. There were articles being published about this in the newspaper. But overall, no one really reacted to this. No one saw that a change was taking place. No one tried to protest the changes that were happening. Here she says that we were the people who were not in the papers. So you read about these incidents in the newspaper, and they're happening to other people. And because they're not happening to you, you don't feel concerned by what's going on with other people, even though they might be suffering. They might be sexually assaulted. They might be murdered. So we lived in the blank white spaces at the edges of print. So if things are happening to other people, you don't feel that it has any importance in your life, so you're just willing to ignore what is happening. You ignore the changes that are taking place. So if people had stood up, if people had said, this is objectionable, we're going to have protests, we're going to object to things that are happening now, perhaps Gilead never would have been able to take power. But because people were complacent, and complacent means to be passive. So we'll see that in Offred's behavior as well throughout a lot of the stories. She is passive. Society in general here was passive. And so Gilead did manage to take hold. And we also see a little bit more about gender roles during the doctor's visit. So Offred, of course, has to be examined regularly to make sure that she's physically healthy. And the doctor uses the word sterile to refer to a man. And this is something that shocks Offred, because in this society, if a couple cannot have a child, they can't conceive, automatically it's the woman who is called barren. The word sterile is simply not used to refer to men. It's not allowed. And she's also objectified here. There's another sheet suspended from the ceiling. It intersects me so that the doctor will never see my face. He deals with the torso only. So she's simply part of a body to him. That's all she is, body parts. And he also calls her honey, which is a little bit demeaning. It's a lot like Aunt Lydia and when she calls the handmaids girls all the time. So again, women are referred to as children who are not independent, who need to be taken care of, who cannot think for themselves. And there's another important quotation on page 73 about how the handmaids are dehumanized, how they are possessions and not individuals in their own right. I cannot avoid seeing now the small tattoo on my ankle. 4 digits and an I, a passport in reverse. It's supposed to guarantee that I will never be able to fade finally into another landscape. I am too important, too scarce for that. I am a national resource. So the tattoo that she has is reminiscent of the way that the Jews were tattooed in the concentration camps in World War II. And it's 4 numbers, of course, and then there is the eye. The eye, of course, we know symbolizes surveillance, the fact that you're always being watched. And she calls it a passport in reverse. So this is not something that allows her to travel elsewhere. It is something that guarantees that she will never be able to leave Gilead. Even if she did manage to escape, once someone sees that tattoo, they will know that she's a handmaid and they will bring her back to Gilead. So she can never really fully escape into another place. Even if she does manage to escape, because some of them do try to come to Canada, that tattoo will always be there. It's something that cannot be removed, just like the memory of what she is going through can never be removed either. And then there is the ceremony. So the ceremony, of course, is the sexual intercourse that takes place between the handmaid and the commander in order to have a child. And the wife, of course, is part of this ceremony. And there is a lot of preparation that has to go into it for Offred. She has to bathe, she has to clean herself thoroughly. She also has to make sure that she eats all the food on her plate so that she stays healthy. She even asks, if she's not hungry, she's feeling kind of sick to her stomach because the ceremony is coming very soon. And she says about her food, could I leave it on the plate and ask Cora not to report me? So she's not even allowed to leave food on her plate if she isn't hungry. And she also says at one point, I wait, washed, brushed, fed like a prize pig. So again, she feels like a complete possession. She's dehumanized. She feels like an animal. And she also says, I wait, I compose myself. Myself is a thing I must now compose, as one composes a speech. What I must present is a made thing, not something born. So what does this mean exactly? So it's another play on words on the different meanings of the word compose. So when you compose yourself, you're getting yourself together, right? And when you say myself is a thing I must now compose as one composes a speech. So you create a speech, right? You write a speech, you make it. So now she has to make herself. What I must present is a thing made, is a made thing, not something born. So this means that she has to get used to her new reality. She was not born in the Gileadian system. She was born in a completely different system where she was free. So she has to make herself ready for this ceremony, even though it does not come naturally to her. Offred remembers what it was like to be at the Rachel and Leah Center, right? The Red Center, where they train the handmaids. And there was a scene involving testifying, which is something that the handmaids had to do on a regular basis. And testifying involves sharing illicit sexual activities, including sexual assaults, abortions, etc. Things that would be considered immoral or perhaps even illegal in Gilead. So the ants then lead the other women in a chant condemning the speaker. So the entire point to this is to shift the blame from the assailant to the victim. So it's slut shaming, it is victim shaming. So if the woman talks about an incident where she was sexually assaulted, then she has to admit that she was the one to blame and not the person who attacked her. And Offred also thinks, for a moment, even though we knew what was being done to her, we despised her. So this is when Janine talks about when she was sexually assaulted when she was very young. And this is another example of the women being forced to be against each other. They're not allowed to form bonds or friendships. So once again, there is division between the women here. And Offred comments on her perception of self, how the body that she has, how the personality that she has changed completely from pre-Gilead to post-Gilead. I used to think of my body as an instrument of pleasure or a means of transportation or an implement for the accomplishment of my will. So this was in a time when she had complete control over her actions and she could do whatever she liked, whenever she pleased. Now things are different, and she thinks of her body this way. Now the flesh arranges itself differently. Every month there is a moon, gigantic, round, heavy, an omen. I see despair coming towards me like famine. Her body only serves one purpose now, and that is reproduction. So every month there is the ceremony. She hopes that she can have a child. And then whenever she finds out every month that she isn't pregnant, there is despair. Because of course, if a handmaid cannot become pregnant, there is no longer any use for that handmaid. So if you're not pregnant, that equals failure. And we also have a comment on the television, on the news, on propaganda, the state control of the media. And Offred sees an anchorman. He comes on now. His manner is kind, fatherly. He gazes out at us from the screen, looking, with his tan and his white hair and candid eyes, wide wrinkles around them, like everybody's ideal grandfather. What he's telling us, his level smile implies, is for our own good. Everything will be all right soon, I promise. There will be peace. You must trust. You must go to sleep like good children. So just like the handmaids are often referred to as children, the men in the novel are referred to in a fatherly way, right? It's the patriarchy. The men are in control and they get to decide what is good for everyone else. So this particular anchorman has a particular appearance. He looks fatherly. He looks like someone that you can trust, someone who will tell you the truth. In reality, Offred comments on the fact that probably he's an actor and not probably a real news anchor. He's promoting propaganda. And she says, I struggle against him. So she knows that she should not believe what he has to say. One of the news items is about how certain people were arrested for bringing national resources out of the country. So we know that national resources are the handmaids. Of course, if they can't escape, they will try to do so. And often she does not know if he's telling the truth or if he's lying. And she struggles against him because there is part of her that would like to believe him. It would be a lot easier on her if she could believe him. And then this interior struggle, this discomfort that she constantly feels would end because she knows it's propaganda. She knows it isn't real.